Hello friends, and welcome to the Forgotten Past. On this channel, you'll explore untold stories, lost events, ancient discoveries, and hidden secrets from across history. Let's view the video. In the heart of medieval England, a boy was born who would become a symbol of chivalry, war, and legend. Edward of Woodstock, later feared as the Black Prince, emerged from royal blood, destined to carve his name into history as one of England's most formidable and mysterious military leaders. Born in 1330 at Woodstock Palace, Edward was the eldest son of King Edward III and Queen Philippa of Hainault. His birth marked him heir to the Plantagenet dynasty, a family deeply rooted in warfare, honor, and continental ambition. From infancy, Edward's path was forged in the fire of expectation. The English court ensured Edward received elite training in arms, statecraft, and religion. Surrounded by noble tutors and hardened knights, he learned Latin, theology, military discipline, and the art of leadership. Unlike many royal heirs, he showed both aptitude and passion for knightly skill and dynastic duty from an early age. Edward's identity was shaped by his father's vision of reclaiming English rights in France. As a boy, he watched Edward III plan the 100 Years' War, absorbing the language of conquest. The idea of restoring Plantagenet glory through military dominance became a personal and political mission Edward eagerly inherited. By his teenage years, Edward was a living symbol of English power. Invested as Prince of Wales at age 13, he carried not just a title, but the nation's hopes for martial greatness. His early tournaments displayed courage and control, winning admiration from nobles and common soldiers alike. As tensions with France escalated, Edward was prepared not only as a prince, but as a warrior prince. The chivalric world he inhabited was brutal, but Edward embraced it fully. His coat of arms bore the emblem of France quartered with England, clear, intent that he aimed to rule beyond his island kingdom. Every step of Edward's youth pointed toward destiny, shaped by heritage, honed by training, and driven by royal ambition. He stood on the cusp of legendary greatness. England had produced many kings, but now, in Edward, it had bred a black-armored warrior who would lead from the front and change history forever. In 1346, at just 16 years old, Edward of Woodstock faced his first true test of steel and spirit. The Battle of Crécy would not only shape his legacy, but mark a turning point in medieval warfare. What began as a campaign of ambition would end in brutal, legendary triumph. King Edward III invaded Normandy, marching inland with a mobile English army. His son Edward, now leading his own division, commanded experienced knights and longbowmen. Though young, the Black Prince quickly gained respect through discipline, courage, and keen judgment. His leadership would be crucial in the storm to come. On August 26th, near the village of Crécy, a massive French army outnumbered the English 3-1. French knights were proud and impatient. Their king, Philip VI, launched a reckless attack. Edward's division was placed on the right flank, where the fighting would be bloodiest. There the prince stood firm. The English defense relied on longbowmen in staggered rows. As the Genoese crossbowmen advanced for the French, a sudden rainstorm rendered their weapons useless. The English longbow, faster and more powerful, rained death. Edward's command held their ground, disciplined and deadly in the face of wave after wave of cavalry charges. At one point, Edward's position was nearly overrun. A messenger rode to King Edward III, asking whether the prince should be rescued. The king refused, saying, "Let the boy win his spurs." Edward fought fiercely, refusing retreat. His valor became the turning point as French forces fell in chaos and confusion. By nightfall, thousands of French lay dead, including knights and nobles. The French king barely escaped. The English had lost few, but gained eternal renown. Edward's performance was hailed as nothing short of heroic. He had proven himself under fire and emerged a living embodiment of English martial pride. The Battle of Crécy made Edward a legend across Europe. More than just a prince, he was now a warrior tested in battle. The discipline, tactics, and fearlessness he displayed at Crécy forged the foundation of his fearsome reputation. From this moment on, he would forever be known as the Black Prince. 10 years after Crécy, Edward the Black Prince faced his greatest challenge yet. In 1356, deep in French territory, he led a vastly outnumbered English force against King John II's powerful army. What followed at Poitiers would become one of the most shocking and glorious victories in medieval history. Edward's army, around 6,000 strong, was retreating through Aquitaine after a destructive chevauchée, burning and raiding French towns. King John II mustered 20,000 men to trap them. Edward chose to fight, digging in near Poitiers. He positioned archers and dismounted knights in a brilliant defensive formation among hedges and narrow lanes. The battle began with French cavalry charging the English lines. The longbowmen, concealed and elevated, unleashed devastating volleys. Horses fell, men screamed, and chaos spread. The French could not penetrate the defenses. Edward's planning, using terrain, discipline, and patience, began to cripple a force 3 times the size of his own. King John launched wave after wave, but Edward counterattacked at the perfect moment. The English surged forward, led by the prince himself. Hand-to-hand combat raged through the smoke and dust. Edward's black armor was a beacon for friend and foe alike. His courage inspired his men to hold firm. In the final phase, the French king and his nobles were surrounded. Refusing to flee, King John fought until he was forced to surrender. It was a stunning humiliation for France. Edward, showing chivalric grace, treated the king with honor, offering him food, comfort, and a place beside him at dinner. The victory at Poitiers shook Europe. With one battle, the Black Prince had defeated a superior army, captured the French monarch, and struck terror into his enemies. The English demanded an enormous ransom for the king's release, crippling the French economy and shaking the legitimacy of their crown. At Poitiers, Edward proved himself not only a warrior, but a master of strategy and leadership. His blend of chivalry and ruthlessness became his hallmark. He was no longer just a prince of war, he was the nightmare of French nobility, a black lion whose roar echoed across Christendom. After Poitiers, Edward was rewarded with the Duchy of Aquitaine, a vast and wealthy region in southwestern France. In 1362, he moved his court to Bordeaux. No longer just a battlefield commander, Edward now faced the complex challenge of ruling lands filled with rival lords, cultural tensions, and growing unrest. Edward established a princely court filled with splendor. Bordeaux became a hub of English influence in France, blending Gothic elegance with military strength. He issued charters, levied taxes, and knighted loyal nobles. Yet, behind the grandeur, resentment simmered. Locals resented English rule and the burdens of wartime administration. Edward styled himself as a just ruler, balancing diplomacy and force. However, his government grew costly. Maintaining castles, troops, and officials required heavy taxation. Aquitanian nobles protested. Many accused Edward of arrogance and exploitation. The same boldness that made him victorious in battle now alienated those he sought to govern. To assert dominance, Edward crushed dissent with swift, brutal force. Rebel lords were hunted and castles razed. One notable incident saw his forces burn entire villages suspected of harboring enemies. Though militarily effective, these actions fed the image of Edward as a dark and merciless ruler rather than a benevolent prince. His marriage to Joan of Kent in 1361 had brought a measure of stability. Joan, a royal cousin, was elegant, respected, and politically astute. Together they tried to legitimize English rule, founding religious institutions and patronizing the arts. Yet the rising financial strain threatened everything they built together in Aquitaine. Discontent exploded in 1369 when the French crown under Charles V reclaimed sovereignty over Aquitaine. Local lords switched allegiance, war resumed, and Edward's health began to fail. The once glorious prince, burdened by rebellion and disease, found himself losing control over the very lands he had once ruled with pride. The Prince of Aquitaine had become a shadow of the Black Prince of Poitiers. Though still revered by many, Edward's rule revealed the limits of conquest. Warfare had won him a kingdom, but holding it required more than swords. The hero of Crécy now faced the slow unraveling of his authority. In 1367, Edward answered a call for help from Pedro the Cruel, the deposed king of Castile. Backed by his father's support, Edward led an expedition into Spain to restore Pedro. It was a bold move, but one that would stretch his resources, test his strength, and accelerate his tragic downfall. Edward's army marched across the Pyrenees into harsh Spanish terrain, battling heat, disease, and supply shortages. Though experienced, his forces suffered greatly. Allied with Pedro, Edward faced Bertrand du Guesclin and Henry of Trastamara, leaders of the Franco-Castilian resistance. The campaign strained Edward's finances and frayed loyalties within his army. The Battle of Nájera on April 3, 1367 was a brutal clash. Edward's tactics brought victory. His longbowmen and cavalry devastated the enemy ranks. Du Guesclin was captured, and Henry fled. Yet Pedro's cruelty toward prisoners shocked Edward's allies. Their triumph was tainted by betrayal and moral revulsion. Pedro refused to repay Edward for the campaign's cost. The prince, burdened by war debts, returned to Aquitaine financially broken and physically exhausted. Worse still, he began suffering from a mysterious illness, possibly dysentery or a wasting disease. His once great strength now failed him, and his decline had truly begun. Back in Aquitaine, rebellions intensified. With Edward too sick to lead in person, his enemies sensed opportunity. The French, revitalized under Charles V, pushed aggressively. Castles fell, allies deserted, and English control collapsed. Edward's reputation faded from that of a black-armored lion to a ruler too weak to roar. Despite his illness, Edward continued to fight. In 1370, he ordered the sack of Limoges, where French sympathizers had risen. The city was stormed and thousands killed, men, women, and children. Chroniclers debated the extent of the massacre, but it forever darkened Edward's name, staining the legend he once embodied. Edward had become a shell of the young warrior who triumphed at Poitiers. Ravaged by disease and disillusioned by politics, he withdrew from Aquitaine in 1371. No longer a triumphant prince, he returned to England, battered, haunted, and broken. His final campaign had been not in Spain, but against time itself. By 1371, Edward the Black Prince had returned to England a broken man. Illness consumed his body, and the failures in Aquitaine weighed heavily on his mind. Though once the embodiment of English chivalry, he now lived in seclusion, haunted by memories of fire, steel, and a glory that had faded. He attempted one last political act, defending his father's interests in Parliament. Despite his failing health, Edward advocated for reforms and justice. He supported the Commons and spoke against corruption. Those who saw him remembered the Lion of Crécy, now aged, pale, and barely able to stand without help. On June 8, 1376, Edward died at the Palace of Westminster at just 45 years old. England mourned. His funeral was grand, attended by nobles and commoners alike. Buried in Canterbury Cathedral, he left behind a son, young Richard, destined to inherit the crown, but not his strength or renown. Edward's epitaph, engraved in Latin, warned of life's fleeting nature. His tomb shows him in full black, armor, hands in prayer. Beneath the hero's exterior lay a man shaped by unrelenting war, ambition, and exhaustion. He had wanted to be remembered as a loyal knight, not a king, but as a warrior of honor. Over time, legends of the Black Prince grew darker. Chroniclers described both his chivalry and his brutality, the burning of Limoges, the harsh taxation of Aquitaine. French sources painted him as a merciless butcher, while English writers hailed him as a noble paragon. The truth lay somewhere in between myth and man. His legacy shaped military strategy for generations. His mastery of longbow tactics and mobile warfare influenced the English way of war well into the 15th century. He became a model for medieval knighthood, brave, cunning, and flawed. The black armor became a symbol not only of fear, but of martial excellence. Today, the Black Prince remains one of medieval England's most complex figures. Neither saint nor villain, he embodied the brutal glory of his age. His life was forged in fire and finished in silence, but his shadow remains forever, marching with the legends of war, honor, and the price of greatness. Thanks for watching The Forgotten Past. If you enjoyed the journey, like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a hidden story or untold truth. New discoveries await. See you in the next video.